In 2030, the world got hit with a blast of spiritual energy. But despite that, normal life was still a drag, with bosses yelling all the time. Until our boy got tired of being exploited and told them all to shove it, leaving his coworkers completely shocked by his attitude, because, turns out, he awakened as a ghost cultivator right then and there. With the mass awakening, people started fighting over resources. However, our protagonist remembers his life as an ordinary student, where a classmate would call out to him, telling him not to be late for class. His parents worked their butts off, so he could have a better life than they did. That's why he and everyone else were studying themselves into the ground all the time. Meanwhile, the teacher was yelling at a student for not paying attention, and everyone in the classroom turned to see who was getting the lecture. It was our boy who accidentally used his powers and made a pen float. Years later, he became the strongest and put an end to the world war. But even with peace, the survivors still seemed to want more trouble. Our hero, Ye Chen, loses his patience and tells everyone to get on their knees. And the entire crowd panics, looking up with no clue what's going on. Because a giant finger made of energy starts descending toward them, threatening to crush anyone who doesn't obey Ye Chen's order. And just like that, the crowd is thrown back by the sheer pressure of his power. Then, a massive hand forms over the destroyed city. So out of fear, they all start yelling that Ye Chen is the handsomest guy around. Soon after, the scene changes to a giant building in the city center, where a magic pen writes by itself on a piece of paper. Actually, it's a young woman using her powers to sign several documents at once, because she needs to read through reconstruction plans and fugitive lists. We also see a chaotic office with papers flying everywhere. And then a big meeting takes place to discuss the future. Meanwhile, his assistant informs him that the world needs to be rebuilt. Finally, she says that Ye Chen needs to take on this huge responsibility. Our hero, Ye Chen, doesn't like the idea and asks if she's kidding. He complains that he's busted his hump his whole life, and now that there's peace, he just wants to rest. With a grimace, he says his only wish is to be a lone wolf. But his assistant isn't having it and smacks him on the head with a clipboard. Ye Chen then complains, saying he's the invincible one and deserves some respect. But she just ignores him and chases him down to give him a few more walks. The woman points at him and tells the guy to take a look in the mirror. Because he's in shorts and flops at a meeting that will decide the future. She also reminds him that he has a lot of responsibilities to the world. So our protagonist suddenly comes up behind her and puts a hand on her shoulder, making the young woman all flustered. Our boy tells her to handle the paperwork with their team. And if anyone disobeys, just let him know, and he'll come lay the smack down. He then dashes off at high speed to escape the lecture, leaving his assistant behind, absolutely furious with the situation. His assistant doesn't give up and continues to stare him down with a very serious look. And then she asks if he's sure he's not going to do his chores. Our protagonist replies that there's nothing left for him to do now that peace has arrived. However, she warns him that if he just stands around, he'll end up feeling very lonely. Our hero stops to think for a bit and realizes her words make sense. So he perks up and asks what kind of relaxing job she has for him. The woman then says he's getting old and needs to go on a blind date. At first, Ye Chen even likes the idea, thinking it'll be an easy gig. But then it hits him, and he screams from the top of the building in disbelief. The scene then takes us to a restaurant where the date is supposed to happen, and there we meet a white-haired young woman meditating with several swords. Suddenly, she opens her eyes, which glow, showing off all her power. Then, the woman starts controlling all the swords floating around her. But she only uses the blades to slice meat with incredible precision, and the dishes are served with magic, straight to the tables, like the one our boy is at. Sitting in the restaurant, our hero Ye Chen thinks about his parents and world peace. Being there alone, he remembers how in school, people used to talk smack about blind dates. That's why he's just sitting there, tapping his fingers on the table with nothing to do. Then he remembers when he complained to his assistant about marriage. Our boy was sporting a less than thrilled look on his face because of the situation. But his assistant was giving him a very intimidating stare. That's why our hero tells her not to act like she's his keeper. However, she reveals that his parents fought to the very end to protect them. Because of that, she yells that she has a duty to look after his future. With all the noise, he covers his ears and asks her to calm down. Then she hands him a document with more details about the plan. The woman explains that several factions want to form marriage alliances with him. But our protagonist says he won't be fooled because he's studied a lot. He remembers that in the movies, these alliances are always with beautiful ladies. But in reality, they're with weirdos, which is why he refuses. His assistant reminds him that he's basically a weapon of mass destruction. So our boy asks, all confused, if that makes him really handsome. The woman just smiles and pats his head with a teasing air. and then she pinches his cheek and says no one would look twice at him. However, she reveals that out of fear, they will send their most beautiful girls, leaving our protagonist wide-eyed at this revelation. So he understands the whole logic behind her plan and calms down. And with a sly grin, he asks her to send a picture first. Yachen then asks if she's free herself, but she immediately says no. The assistant says the choice is his, and that it's better to keep it a mystery. Back in the restaurant, he thinks about how he was completely played by her, until a young woman arrives and introduces herself as his date. Our hero turns beet red and gets nervous at the girl's gentle voice, so he tries to say that he's also there for the blind date. But when he looks up, he's met with a terrifying demon mask. In a shocking close-up, Yichen's face is pure horror. He's stunned. The woman in the blue mask appears, imposing, standing there in a traditional dress. In despair, Yichen yells, "How can it be you?" He recognizes her. And so begins the second chapter of this whole mess, showing him with a bunch of different women. The crowd outside the restaurant is terrified and whispers a name, Lan. In a panic, the street screams Lan Duodo. Fear spreads. The crowd flees in terror, some riding on tigers. No one wants to stick around. The explanation for the panic reveals that Lan Duodo is an extremely dangerous dark saintess. Back in the restaurant, Yichen is face to face with the masked woman, Lan Duodo. Yichen asks why she's there, since her faction had already surrendered. Flashback: Lan Duo with her followers holds a ball of green, poisonous energy. Yichen was almost taken out by her poison but survived thanks to a divine doctor. In the next flashback, Yichen faces Lan Duodo in a poisoned, desolate land. He was seeking revenge, but she had also powered up, getting badly injured. The flashback reveals Lan Duodo's injured legs, with Yichen close to victory, but hurt himself. The young woman then starts to say something shyly, and explains she's at the blind date on her great shaman's orders. Our hero, however, doesn't seem convinced by the story at all, so he stands up and yells that they were mortal enemies in the past. But she says she has nothing against him, leaving the guy shocked. That's why Yichen reminds her that they've fought to the bitter end several times. Lan Duoduo insists she was just following orders so she wouldn't get wiped out. Hearing this, our boy gets thoughtful, trying to understand the situation. So he scratches his head and asks what the heck is going on. And she asks if they can continue the date now that they don't hate each other. However, our boy immediately refuses, saying she gives him the creeps. So he decides to leave, saying the two of them are not a good match at all. But as he was leaving, our protagonist seems to change his mind. He turns to her, and she asks what he wants now. Then she says her shaman told her to take off the mask to make him change his mind. Our hero then realizes that no one has ever seen her face before. That's why the girl starts to remove her mask very slowly in front of him. Our protagonist waits with bated breath for the big moment, and he watches her every move with enormous curiosity. Upon seeing her face, our boy is completely shocked and turns bright red. Then he lets out a scream so loud it echoes throughout the entire city. Lan Duoduo, with a cute little face, asks if he's changed his mind. And right after, she cuts to the chase, asking if they can get married now. Our hero nods his head right away, agreeing to her proposal, but then he denies everything, shaking his head from side to side. He then yells that a blind date doesn't lead directly to marriage. But she says if they get married, she'll have no problem loving him. Our boy completely loses it and grabs his head, not believing what he's hearing. So he grabs her and asks if she even knows what love is. Lan Duoduo replies that she doesn't know but is a fast learner because she's a genius. Lan Duoduo insists she can learn to love him because she's a true genius. Hearing this, our hero gives a sly little smirk, thinking of something, because he remembers that, unlike her, he had to pray to pass his tests. So, with a finger in the air, he prepares to give a lecture on love. But when it's time to speak, our boy ends up freezing and says nothing. So, he gets all awkward and scratches his head, not knowing what to do. And, with his back to us, we see the guy totally lost in the conversation. Meanwhile, Lan Duoduo stares at him with a very serious and curious expression. Our protagonist then realizes he's never had time for love in his life, until suddenly he has a brilliant idea to solve this. And, with a smile, he announces that he's going to ask someone right now, leaving the girl completely confused, with no idea what he's about to do. Yichen uses a divine power, his eyes glowing and an energy sphere forming. Then he uses his ability, Grand Universal Transfer, creating a portal. Finally, he pulls a very confused Lan Duoduo through the portal, and just like that, they appear in the assistant's office, who is super busy. Our boy then explains that he learned this skill back in his school days, and after clearing his throat, he gets ready to put his plan into action. Then he enters the room, surprising the assistant and her many copies. For a moment, we see their reflection in the eye of one of the copies. And they all ask at the same time what he wants there at that moment. Our hero, in a chibi and scared version, asks them to put away their powers. So all the copies merge back into a single person in the middle of the room. And with one step, she walks out of the portal and back to the normal world. The assistant then waves at Lan Duo, making her a bit embarrassed, and the girl greets her back with a shy and very quiet voice. Then the woman turns and pokes our protagonist right in the chest. She complains that she's working and doesn't have time to deal with the couple. But our boy says he has a serious matter and needs her help. Finally, he asks her to explain to Lan Duo what love is. The assistant turns bright red and says she knows nothing about love. But our hero calls her bluff, reminding her that she used to read romance comics. Flustered, the woman asks what's wrong with having read those things. And our boy insists that's why she has theoretical experience on the subject. So the assistant gets awkward and thinks for a moment before answering, and explains that love is feeling nervous around someone and thinking about them when they're away. Our protagonist then asks Lan Duo if she understood what love is. The girl immediately replies that she definitely loves our hero, Yi Chen, because she always got nervous and thought about him during their battles. Hearing this, the assistant can't hold it in and starts laughing uncontrollably, leaving our boy irritated and Lan Duo completely confused. So our hero asks the girl to wait so he can talk to his assistant alone. Then he simply grabs the assistant's arm and pulls her, and uses a teleportation spell to disappear from there with the woman, leaving Lan Duo behind all alone and with no clue what just happened. On top of a building, the assistant yells at our hero, completely confused, because the two of them appeared there out of nowhere after a quick teleport. With her arms crossed, the woman glares at him with a not-so-friendly expression, and our protagonist accuses her of knowing who the girl was from the very beginning. But she asks if he would have come to the date if he had known the truth. Ye Chen then yells that he would never have had the guts to go if he knew it was her, because the memory of almost being done in by her poison still haunts him, and even with his indestructible body, the trauma will last a lifetime. His assistant then asks if he didn't find Lan Duo really cute. Our hero just lights a cigarette to try and calm his nerves, and says his mom was right, beautiful women are dangerous. But the woman scolds him and says he's being way too picky. But our boy accuses her of setting this all up and hiding something from him, and threatens to read her mind if she doesn't tell him the whole truth right now. The assistant then panics and forbids him from invading her privacy. Our hero, in a chibi version, demands a good reason for this whole mess. And up there on the skyscraper, his assistant prepares to tell him everything. She then begins to speak in a very serious and mysterious way, and reveals that if the date goes wrong, Lan Duo will no longer have a home. The woman continues with a sad expression as she explains the situation, leaving our protagonist Yi Chen completely shocked by the news, because she explains that everything changed when new abilities started popping up online. On top of that, even cultivation apps appeared on cell phones, and factions began to create their own weapons, like the Zombie King. That's why other groups developed humanoid weapons to fight back on equal terms. That's how the human weapon rankings were created to measure power. And back then, Lan Duo was just a second-grade student. She and other children were captured for a cruel cultivation method, as they were forced to participate in a terrible survival ritual. And in the end, only little Lan Duo managed to survive. Our hero then remembers that he also nearly bit the dust several times, and asks what that has to do with Lan Duo not having a home. The assistant explains that with peace, he's seen as a great hero. But then she asks what the girl's fate would be in this world, because everyone fears her for her reputation as a walking poison weapon. In a flashback, a little girl offers a doll to Lan Duo. The small child just wanted to show a gesture of pure friendship. However, the young woman can't bring herself to accept the gift, and ends up dropping the doll on the ground in front of everyone there. Because of this, the girl's father bows down, scared to bits of her, and then he runs off in a panic with his daughter in his arms, leaving poor Lan Duo with an expression of immense sadness. And so she was left alone, with the shadow of a monster haunting her. Back in the present, our protagonist remains silent, processing everything. Finally, the assistant asks if he's also afraid of her now. The assistant stares at him, and our hero stays quiet for a moment. Then she slaps him and complains that he won't be invincible forever, and says that even though she lost once, she'll catch up to him soon. But our boy smiles and tells her to leave everything to him and go back. The woman, however, looks at him suspiciously, not understanding his attitude. That's why she asks what he plans to do now that he knows everything. But our hero opens a teleportation portal right behind her, and with a push, he sends her back to her office. Then, with a snap of his fingers, the portal closes quickly. The assistant is then thrown back into her office suddenly. And with the shock, she ends up falling out of her chair in a funny way. The woman then gets up and yells at him, but it's already too late. Finally, she just stands there in silence with a very annoyed look on her face. Meanwhile, our protagonist is left alone on top of the building, and a large magic circle appears in the sky, showing that he has a plan. Our hero looks up and says that being lonely at the top isn't the life he wants. Then, he uses his powers to teleport back to the restaurant instantly. He finds Landuadio still standing in the exact same spot where he left her. Our boy asks if she has really been standing there all this time. She replies that the Great Witch told her to follow his orders, and he told her to wait. Ye Chen sighs, realizing she was trained as a human machine, with no independent thought. He tells her to take a seat, so they can actually talk things through. They sit face to face, and our hero reminds her that they are old enemies. He mentions he once beat her so bad she was bedridden for half a year. Landuadio tilts her head and asks if that means they should get married. Ye Chen yells for her to stop thinking about marriage for a second. He says that, as enemies, they understand each other deeper than anyone. Landuadio then asks if he wants to be a father as soon as they marry. She says they can get a free child with phone credit, or pick one from a trash can. Shocked by the absurdity, Ye Chen spits his water directly into her face. With her face all wet, Landuadio is speechless and starts to cry. Our hero realizes his blunder and apologizes, trying to fix things. He gets desperate seeing the girl cry, and doesn't know what to do, and thinks that dealing with her is harder than fighting or taking exams. Then, after taking a deep breath, he tries to calm down to resolve the issue, and explains that dating is a two-person thing, and that he doesn't love her yet. That's why he says she needs to learn how to smile before getting married. Then our boy forces a smile onto her face with his fingers. But the touch makes Landuadio release a purple poison that covers the area. Our protagonist gets scared seeing the toxic smoke everywhere, and suddenly the entire restaurant collapses because of the poison. So the two of them are left in the middle of the rubble as the smoke clears. Our hero then yells, asking why she released the poison again, and she says it's a combat reflex that needs to be changed. Finally, he pressures her to change, and she agrees, afraid of his reaction. Then our hero activates his divine ability to fix the mess. And with the power of time reversal, he goes back in time with Landuadio. So the restaurant returns to normal as if nothing ever happened, and the two of them reappear in the middle of the completely intact place. The girl then asks since when he could reverse time, and our boy replies that he learned right after she beat him up, but he thinks to himself that he can't tell her, he trained 1,000 times just to beat her. Then he tells her to get a job and learn how to win him over. Landuadio agrees and says she'll create a poison to make him fall in love. Our hero gets excited and asks if she can do it right now. And the girl reveals that she's already tried several things, but nothing worked on him, because not even super concentrated pheromones had any effect. However, she guarantees she's a pro at creating poisons and will succeed. Tired, our protagonist decides to ask his assistant for help, and walks off, yelling the woman's name to find a job for Lan. Suddenly, a mysterious voice echoes through the entire city, challenging our hero. And next to Landuadio, our boy finds that voice very familiar. The girl then reveals that it's Yahello, a demoness stronger than her. Hearing this, our protagonist gets excited because he wanted a good fight. He tells Landuadio to find his assistant and flies off to the brawl. With a predator's smile, he prepares for the great battle that awaits him. Our hero then yells back, accepting the enemy's challenge. And then he flies into the sky to meet his opponent. And up there, the demoness Yahello comes at him with everything she's got. She even turns her legs into giant claws for the attack. The clash between the two then generates a blast of red energy. Meanwhile, the people on the street don't understand the woman's courage. But a fan yells for our hero to teach the demon race a lesson. The fight continues high above with a huge explosion in the city sky. And the demoness prepares to attack with one of her sharp claws. The demoness Yahello attacks with her legs, but our hero easily dodges. And with a mocking smile, he says her attack was pretty weak. She then gets angry and reveals that the score between them is neck and neck. And she prepares to use a new move she recently invented. The demoness opens her mouth to use her unknown special power. And with a scream, she unleashes a wave of energy toward our boy, but he simply sucks the entire attack into his body. And then he throws all the energy up toward space. The woman is left speechless, seeing her attack completely nullified. And when she turns around, our protagonist had already vanished into thin air. The demoness then starts laughing and boasting about her supposed victory, and yells to the city that the world is now in her hands. She tells everyone to kneel and become her biggest fans. But suddenly, she feels a sharp pain right in her stomach. And with a scream of pain, the demoness writhes, not understanding what happened. The demoness's belly suddenly starts to swell for no reason, because she realizes there's a small universe inside her stomach. And in there, our hero Ye Chen floats peacefully in the void. From in there, he yells and mocks her for swallowing random stuff. The demoness then becomes furious and grinds her teeth in anger and pain. and with her beastly teeth, she screams that she'll digest him no matter what. So she uses all her power to try and finish off our protagonist, and her stomach begins to contract to crush everything inside. But the red energy is sucked away, and her belly returns to normal. Back in the city, a building starts to shake strangely. Meanwhile, a secretary runs desperately to warn her boss, and finds our hero's assistant calmly sipping a coffee. The woman tries to warn her about the fight but can't get the words out, and her boss just ignores her and continues to look at a plant. Finally, the secretary yells that people who swallow people always end up in a bad spot. The secretary tries to play it cool, but accidentally points toward the fight. Outside, the demoness Yuwali floats over the city, completely exhausted. And with a sweaty face, she seems to be in a lot of pain. Then she loses her strength and starts falling toward the ground. And a pillar of golden light appears out of nowhere and hits her dead on. The demoness then crashes into the middle of the street, opening a crater in the asphalt. And a crowd gathers around her to see the scene up close, but with her eyes glowing red, she prepares to attack. And everyone runs off in a panic, afraid she'll lose control. The street becomes completely empty with the demoness alone in the crater. She then admits defeat and yells for our hero to get out of there. With a victorious smile, our boy tells her to open her mouth. And from inside her, he calmly walks out, complaining about the woman's bad breath. Then our protagonist simply turns his back and walks away. Finally, he turns around and asks if she understands his feelings now. Our hero is shocked by what he sees in front of him, and points at the demoness, unable to believe the scene, because somehow she has shrunk and become the size of a child. Our boy then questions her about this sudden change in size. Embarrassed, the little demoness yells at him not to look at her. But our protagonist starts laughing and patting her on the head. He says she looks cute like this and doesn't need to be so feisty. But the girl screams at him not to touch her and to forget what he saw. Suddenly, her sandal transforms into a bunny ear. And as she stands up, the demoness seems to have turned into a bunny girl. The two then stare at each other in an awkward and funny silence. Our hero picks up the sandal and changes it back to normal. But the bunny girl gets furious and turns beet red over the situation. So our boy gives a magical puff of air to erase her memory. Finally, he laughs and tells her to forget everything, or he'll devour her. Our hero then holds the demoness by her bunny ears and teases her, saying he thought she was a carnivore, but she's a herbivore. The girl gets furious and lunges at him with her sharp claws, leaving our protagonist speechless at her over-the-top reaction. He then grabs her and threatens to turn her into a rabbit stew. The little demoness is shocked at the thought of being eaten by him, and with an evil grin, our boy gets closer to tease her. He licks his lips and says he loves to eat spicy rabbit heads. Scared, the girl gives up and says if she lost, he can do whatever he wants. Our hero finds her behavior very strange and suspicious. So she yells and tells him to just eat her already without stalling. He then questions her for wearing a kippah dress to a fight, and reminds her that she calls herself a prehistoric beast. The girl gets all flustered and tries to cover it up with big words. Finally, our boy lets her go inside, tired of all the chaos. With the fall, the little demoness makes a funny and confused face. And sitting on the ground, she complains about our hero letting her go so suddenly. Our protagonist then realizes something important about the situation, and asks if she also came for a blind date with him. The girl turns bright red and gets embarrassed upon hearing the question, and explains that demonesses are forced to be with the strongest male. Our hero, however, gives a sly grin at the revelation, and makes fun of her for not knowing that humans and demons don't mix. The little demoness then shrinks and grinds her teeth in shame, and says that only the strong are worthy of her solitary company. Our boy gets thoughtful, trying to understand her logic, and remembers that she's a weapon created to fight against other factions. On top of that, she's a mix of several different demon species, and even though she fought for her race, she became the loneliest being in the world. Finally, our protagonist reaches out his hand to pet her. Our hero Yi Chen gets all flustered trying to comfort the little demoness, until suddenly, the girl's stomach starts to rumble really loudly, and she says she used a lot of power and now needs to eat before anything else. Then, at the restaurant, a crowd gathers to watch the little demoness eat. Our hero Ye Chen just stares at the stacks of plates with a little smirk, because the bunny girl loves human food and eats nonstop. Our boy whistles and pokes fun at the whole situation, and even imagines what it would be like if she ate real grass. Suddenly, a buff chef arrives with a giant plate of noodles. The little demoness then prepares to devour the new meal, and without wasting any time, she attacks the plate with the hunger of a lion. The girl dives headfirst into the plate, so not even the broth is left. Even so, she asks for 200 more plates, and he tells her to get lost. But the demoness says they never separate from a partner. Our hero complains that he's not going to support a bottomless pit like her. Out of nowhere, she returns to her normal size and slams her foot on the table, and states that this is the rule of her race, and he has to accept it. And so the entire crowd finally recognizes the fearsome Yuwali. With the revelation of her identity, the whole crowd runs off in a panic. And in seconds, the restaurant is empty, with just the two of them at the table. Our hero Yi Chen then stares at her with a very serious and thoughtful look. Meanwhile, the demoness seems quite satisfied after eating so much. And with her tongue out, she licks her lips, showing she loved the food. Our boy then asks if she really doesn't plan on leaving. He insists and asks if she won't leave even if she gets a beating. But the bunny girl just shakes her head firmly, saying no. Seeing there's no way out, our hero lets out a tired sigh and says she needs to learn to act like a normal human. The demoness agrees right away and says she will obey all his power. So he tells her to study the local culture from scratch and stop using big words, and decides her first lesson will be to learn the language properly. With an evil smile and a glint in his eye, he has a terrible plan. Because she'll have to study various subjects and even take tests on everything. However, the demoness Yuwali accepts and says she will devour all the studies. Our hero Yi Chen then smiles because he knows the heck she's about to go through, and he can already picture her drowning in books with no time for anything else. Then he clears his throat and tries to adopt a more serious posture, and tells the bunny girl that he has high hopes for her future. However, the demoness's stomach starts to rumble loudly again, and she complains of hunger, asking for more food to fill her stomach. Our hero then explains that the city's food supply is limited, and tells her to go eat in a nearby pasture since she's become a herbivore. The scene then takes us to the top of a very tall skyscraper, where he finds his assistant and asks about Land Duaduo. The woman then reveals that she put her to work in the post-war rescue efforts. Our protagonist is in shock and can't believe what he just heard, and yells at her, asking how a poisoned user is going to save anyone.